Hey everyone, so spoilers for Spider-Man No Way Home if you haven't seen the movie. In this video, we're going to talk about the villains, the heroes, and the future of Spider-Man in general in the MCU. And yeah, without further ado, let's get right into it. So first off, the overall story was probably the most Peter Parker story that we've gotten in the MCU. It was a very grounded movie, yet it's absolutely huge. Like, all of you know what's in this movie, and it's kind of just mind-blowing when you really think about the scale of it. But it's such a personal movie, and Tom Holland wasn't kidding when he said this is like the most ambitious standalone superhero movie that's probably ever been made. Seeing all the villains come back was super fun. Obviously, Alfred Molina, Willem Dafoe, Jaime Foxx, all of them coming back to reprise their role after years. It was super fun to see them interact with each other and ask each other questions about each of their Spider-Man, and for the audience to kind of relearn about these characters through the eyes of Peter, MJ, and Ned. We kind of get to be reintroduced to these characters. They don't necessarily make the villains super evil. As soon as they're plucked out of their universe, they don't really have any motivations. Like, they're not inherently like evil people that want to just go around like destroying everything. These Spider-Man villains, they each had their own personal problems. So it was nice to see them kind of just be like human again. They just want to get back home. Willem Dafoe absolutely freaking knocked it out of the park. He was terrifying and he was hilarious. And what's hard for him is that he has to play these dual roles of, you know, the Norman Osborn who doesn't want to go killing people, and then the Goblin who's always in the back of his head, who is the Green Goblin. Seeing that play out and him interact with Doc Ock, which we never got to see before, was super cool. And one of the things a lot of people were worried about was there being too many villains in a Spider-Man movie again and it being bad, but they did a really good job of not making these just like one-dimensional, I'm gonna kill you villains, and then they team up. It's actually the opposite. They use the villains in a very unique way because they almost make them main characters themselves. They're actually protagonists. Well, some of them, you're rooting for them to want to get back home and to prevail. Tom Holland's Spider-Man was obviously super funny, and him interacting with MJ and Ned was always fun to see. In this movie, obviously, Peter goes through a lot. First, his identity is revealed, and it's like his life is ruined, so he wants to reverse that. But then that makes everything worse. Aunt May ends up dying, and towards the end of the movie, no one remembers who he is, and he basically has to start from scratch, which is something that I absolutely loved and I thought was so genius of them to do. They were able to make a movie this ambitious, this huge, with all these like multiverse elements, bringing back Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire. I mean, even just saying that, I still can't believe that happened, but we're gonna get into that pretty soon. Making a movie this huge, but always prioritizing Peter Parker first and making sure that his character is actually moving forward in the story. Peter is actively making mistake after mistake, but always with the best intentions. He's never doing anything out of, you know, ill will. He's always trying to do things for others. When he asks Doctor Strange to make that spell, it's not really for him, it's for Ned and MJ and May and everyone else who could possibly be hurt by being associated with Spider-Man. When he decides that he wants to help the villains get home, and the fact that he sees that these guys, these evil dudes, can be cured and can be redeemed, Aunt May ends up dying as a result of that, and still she tells him that he did the right thing and that he had the best intentions possible. And then again at the very end, when he has to make the biggest decision that any Peter Parker in live action has had to make, he basically has no choice but to choose saving the world over his life. No one is going to remember who Peter Parker was, and so basically he has no May, no Ned, MJ, no Happy. He has no affiliation with Tony Stark whatsoever now. Like, they basically were able to soft reboot this Spider-Man, giving him a completely fresh start. Now he's no longer, you know, attached to Stark Enterprises. He doesn't have that technology, but they were also able to make it so that his past movies and his past actions and other MCU movies weren't for nothing, because the acts of Spider-Man still happen. It's just now no one knows who is behind that mask. So I think that was a really like genius way of being able to keep him in the MCU, but also give him a brand new fresh start. So the next trilogy of movies can be literally whatever they want. And that suit by the end was like him officially becoming the Spider-Man, the grown-up superhero Spider-Man that we all have been waiting for him to be. You know, throughout these movies, Homecoming, Far From Home, and even the Avengers movies, we've seen him like stumble, just trying to like, you know, just keep up with the Avengers and try to do his best. And so by the end, he creates his own suit himself out of a sewing machine. I absolutely loved that. That was so Peter Parker. He even has a little like police comm stuffs where he's tracking crimes and whatnot. And that final swing was just like chef's kiss. It was perfect. And I would like to think that he kind of took inspiration from the other Spider-Man that he met, because they had just classic Spider-Man costumes where Peter had, all this dark tech on him. I feel like he saw the other Spider-Man just being themselves, being classic Spider-Man, and he wanted that for himself. So he went ahead and made his own suit. As this Spider-Man progresses in the MCU, we'll kind of have a little like legacy of Andrew and Tobey living within Tom Holland Spider-Man. So that was like amazing. So the thing everyone is most excited for is Andrew and Tobey coming back in this movie. You could feel like the tension in the theater, like everyone was just waiting for like, when is it gonna happen? Anytime there was like a hint that someone was about to appear on screen, it was like, is this it? Is this it? So first we had Daredevil pop up, and it was like, oh my god, that's actually Daredevil. Like, it's happening. Holy crap. Then he catches that brick. That was awesome. And then what was genius, is that they introduced the new Spider-Man in the most unexpected setting. Everyone imagined that they would appear like, helping Peter in battle, like he's about to get hurt, and then like, oh my god, it's Spider-Man. But they did it in the most unexpected setting. So when Ned was opening that portal, I thought they were just gonna like, I don't know, get Doctor Strange and he was gonna come back into the movie. And then it has an alleyway and you see like a silhouette of a Spider-Man and you're like, no, that can't be him, right? And then he turns and looks at you. And he turns and it's like, no, that cannot be him. And then he runs towards you and holy crap, it was actually Andrew Garfield in the flesh. Like, even him just like being in the costume wasn't enough, because it was just like everyone was in disbelief. That's him right there. And then he takes the mask off and everyone went wild. It was the best thing ever.
I've always wanted to be at Comic-Con in Hall H as Spider-Man with all of you guys. Has always been a dream of mine.
All right.
So thanks for having me.
And seeing him interact with Ned and MJ was super funny, and seeing him just trying to like figure out what's happening. And as that's happening, they do play like the Amazing Spider-Man theme in the background at that moment. So that was like super cool. Little details like that Spider-Man fans obviously will notice and will absolutely appreciate, because it's just tiny details that add to how much the people making this movie actually cared and wanted people to truly appreciate what this movie was and what it was trying to do. So just adding like the little musical cues here and there was big. Andrew Garfield was probably like the funniest Spider-Man out of all of them. He was super fun to watch. He had some of the funniest moments in this movie. So it was really awesome getting to see him be Spider-Man again. Everyone felt bad for him for having to deny it in interviews and stuff for the longest time. So now it's out there. He's in this movie. Still can't believe it. The suit still looks amazing. And then not long after that, Tobey Maguire is brought through another portal, and it's just like, what is happening? And then him and Andrew exchange looks like oh my god, my brain did not compute Spider-Man. Everyone knew it was going to happen, right? We all knew. You knew it, I knew it. But seeing it for the first time, seeing them interact with each other in the same scene was so surreal. It was a crazy moment. The crowd was going wild. The theater was just going nuts. And it was just this crazy moment of like seeing the Spider-Man that I started watching as a little kid, as a little 5-year-old, and then watching the Spider-Man that I watched, growing up and like in middle school interact with each other. It was just this crazy moment of, this is actually happening. And to see them ask each other about, like their powers and their webbing, their web shooters, all that was the funniest stuff. It was everything that people wanted. And I'm very glad that they helped Peter come back out of the darkness, because they come back at a point in the story where Aunt May has just died and Peter is at his all-time low. They are the only ones in the whole world who really understand how much of an impact and how much of a heavy burden being Spider-Man is. So seeing them talk to him about Uncle Ben taught me, with great power comes great responsibility. Andrew has his moment of mentioning Gwen and how he was unable to save her. And it was really interesting to see him talk about how he stopped pulling his punches after a while. So you can almost imagine like an Amazing Spider-Man 3 where his Spider-Man gets even darker, where he starts like killing the villains and stuff. He's just turned into Batman, Spider-Man, basically. I would like to think that he was still in that dark place, and him being brought to see this new Peter and what he's going through kind of gave Andrew Spider-Man hope and gave him just enough to keep going as Spider-Man. And what makes this movie much more special than like, you know, like Endgame is because these characters are not supposed to be there. Like, they're not even in the MCU. They're from a different, totally different universes. They're from the versions of Spider-Man that you never thought you would get to see again. Last time I saw Tobey Maguire, his Spider-Man in movies, was in 2007. When Spider-Man 3 came out, and that was that. And so to be able to be watching them in theaters again as an adult, it was something that Spider-Man fans needed. So I'm glad we got to have them interact with each other. Super funny stuff. There's a part where like they actually do the pointing meme with each other, and they actually made it work in the scene, like trying to assign names to each other, like Peter 1, Peter 2, Peter 3, and they're like pointing at each other. That was super funny. And I like how they were kind of self-aware of their Spider-Man. Like, there's a point where Ned asks Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man if he has a best friend. Tobey Maguire, like, he nonchalantly tells him about Harry's death and how like, oh, it was so heartbreaking, and he just proceeds doing his science stuff. And it was just like, yeah, like those Spider-Man movies are so dramatic and they're amazing, but they are like these larger than life, maybe even over exaggerated, heightened realities. It may seem like dark and crazy to everyone else, but to Tobey, that's just what happened. And then Andrew Spider-Man talks about how like his Spider-Man's lame and no one really likes his Spider-Man. Really, when you're ranking Spider-Man, it's always like he's at the bottom of the list. So it was so funny to see them acknowledge that and have the other Spider-Man tell him that, no man, you're not lame, you're amazing. It was like they're just talking about themselves and how they feel about their portrayals of Spider-Man, and not necessarily like them talking to each other as the characters. And then seeing them like swing together, fight together, was a dream come true. The way like they, as soon as they clicked, like all their spider senses locked basically, and they were just swinging together perfectly in sync. There's a moment where Tom Holland Spider-Man webs the both of them mid-air and pulls them basically, and so they basically like slingshot past him. It's moments like that where you see them happen, but it happens so quickly that you want to go immediately find the next showing for the movie because you just want to see that one part again. And I loved how you could tell that these three Spider-Men were having an absolute blast being on screen with each other. You can tell that they were having so much fun. The actors themselves, like being around other people who have been Spider-Man, because I can imagine that's like a very unique experience. Like, no one else has been Spider-Man. There's so much that goes along with that, so much responsibility, and to be around other people that understand. And they really did save Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Like, Tobey and Andrew gave him hope. And when he's about to kill the Goblin in that amazing scene where they're fighting it out, he gets his glider and he does a John Walker, he does a freaking Captain America, about to slam it on his freaking on his everything, and you get that amazing shot of Tobey coming in and holding it. That was just like, oh my. That shot is obviously like a little mirror image to Spider-Man 3 when Harry jumps in front of Tobey to save him from getting stabbed. That's when Venom like stabs him. And there are plenty of examples of that in this movie where there's just like little imagery of other Spider-Man movies. So even when Tobey and Andrew aren't in the movie, you can feel their presence. Like, there's the opening bridge scene where Spider-Man and Doc are fighting, and Doc is throwing these cars off the bridge. Peter's having to go save them, so he's like webbing them to the bridge, and he has to go save these people in these cars. Obviously, that is very much the Amazing Spider-Man on that bridge scene. And then we have like a train sequence where Tom Holland Spider-Man is on a train, obviously Spider-Man 2. So there's a bunch of stuff like that in this movie that keep the spirit of the other Spider-Man throughout this movie. They actually referenced a lot of like Raimi Spider-Man memes in this movie, which is kind of funny. There's a part where Doc straight up says like, the power of the sun in the palm of my hand, or Willem Dafoe actually ends up saying, you know, I'm something of a scientist myself. And you know, you might think they're cheesy, but they're just nice acknowledgments. Like, the people making these movies are fans of this stuff. You can just feel that, like, the people who made these movies genuinely are fans of everything surrounding this movie. It doesn't necessarily feel like, you know how like there's movies where it's like Ready Player One, where it's just constant Easter eggs and like, hey, remember this? Hey, remember this? But that feels more like checking boxes, Whereas in this movie, it felt much more like the creators of this movie just having fun with it, getting to make as many jokes and, you know, acknowledgments as much as they can without making them feel super, super cheesy. I thought the overall plot of this movie was very well done. The whole way, it's very much a Peter Parker story. It's about him having to make tough decisions, but it's always out of the goodness of his heart. And that's always what Spider-Man has been. That's always what the character has tried to do. Just trying to do his best, trying to do what's right. And throughout these movies as a kid, he hasn't always made the best decisions, but he's always tried to grow and do the right thing. So that's obviously a great lesson for any kids watching this movie. And it's also a great reminder for any adults. The last thing I really want to talk about is the future for this Spider-Man in the MCU. So obviously at the end of this movie, we see Peter getting his own apartment and no one remembers who Spider-Man is. He makes his own suit. It's just a classic Spider-Man suit. Even though the spider symbol is much more spider-like, it's not that MCU Spider-Man symbol where it's kind of just like that, like geometric, super sharp design. It's like more of an actual spider. And I would like to think that that was also inspired by the other Spider-Man actually having like spider symbols on them. So then we get that final swinging shot of Spider-Man. We've never gotten a like Christmas themed Spider-Man swinging, so I thought that was kind of cool. It was kind of a unique shot. But regarding the future of this franchise, we're probably going to get Venom at some point because we saw the end credit scene where Tom Hardy's Venom was kind of zapped back to his reality, but there was some symbiote stuffs left, so that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. There were some Easter eggs in the actual like multiverse when all those like purple stuffs was coming out. There's probably a bunch of Easter eggs in there, but the things that I know we saw was Rhino was there. There was like a silhouette of him. I think I saw Craven, but what's so refreshing is the fact that they can do anything with their new Spider-Man franchise. They can do anything, so they're not tied down to any continuity really. It's just almost a soft reboot of Spider-Man, so I cannot wait to see what they do. Who knows if they're going to bring back Ned and MJ, because at the end of this movie, Peter was going to make MJ remember, or he was going to try to, but for some reason he doesn't. And they do kind of set up that maybe in the future they will be together again, but there's also that chance of maybe they won't. You know, maybe they'll decide to go a brand new direction. We'll see. Last thing I want to talk about is the music in this movie. It was amazing. Tom Holland's Spider-Man theme was just much more epic this time around, especially like the ending swing. Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man is played, I think, 2 times each. I think one where they're actually introduced, and then one where Andrew is talking to Jaime Foxx's Electro, who is super funny in this movie, and then one where Tobey Maguire is talking to Doc Ock. So those were nice little character moments, seeing these guys interact again. Guys, let me know your favorite parts of this movie. What did you enjoy the most? Whose Spider-Man was your favorite in this movie? I think that's a crazy question that I can ask. Like, what Spider-Man did you like in this movie? Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, or Tom Holland? Personally, I thought Andrew Garfield's was super funny. I thought he's probably like the highlight of the movie for me. Every time he was on screen, you laughed. That's enough out of me. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.